Hey guys, this is Dodoid. So we've been talking a little bit about handheld devices lately, and I figured I'd continue that. So today we have the Palm M500 and the Palm Tungsten E here to look at. Now, I do not have the charger for the M500, I seem to have lost it. However, I could find the charger for my Tungsten E. So first looking at the hardware, I'll point out the differences between the device and show you some of the other things. So, first you can see that the sides do sort of curve in, especially on the M500, though the Tungsten E has a little bit too. This is actually a feature that is from originally the Palm V, which was based originally on the Palm 3, so there's a bit of a history here. It's more prominent on the M500, but it does mean that when you're holding the device in your hand, it's actually rather comfortable because your hand sort of grips in on this, and it still has a decent size. So, the M500 has a black and white screen at the top, and the Tungsten has a color screen. Down at the bottom, both devices have a space for Palm's Graffiti input system. Now basically Graffiti was what happened when Palm realized that recognizing normal handwriting was really hard. So rather than recognize normal handwriting better, they just convinced people to use different handwriting that was easier to recognize. So it's vaguely like normal Latin characters, but there are some differences. Now down along the bottom we have hardware shortcut buttons, and there's also little software shortcut buttons next to the Graffiti area. On the M500, there's an up button and a down button. On the Tungsten E, there's a four-way directional pad and a select button in the middle. You can see what the shortcuts actually do have changed a little bit, though not completely. The Tungsten E is a couple of years later than the M500. They had the M500, then the M505, and then the M515, and then after that they came out with the Tungsten E because this thing was getting old. So let's get the M500 out of the way because it does not have any charge in it, as I said, and we'll take a more look at the functionality of the Tungsten. So first on the bottom, there is the charging plug and USB, which cannot be used to charge it, which is a bit strange. On the top, there is the power button in an iPhone-like position. There is a headphone jack, and there is an SD card slot. Now, these two, headphone jack and SD card slot, are sort of interesting, because although this does not come with a way to play audio files, you could optionally purchase Real Player for this device, where basically you'd put MP3s on here, and then you could play them out of the headphone jack. I do have a Trio 650 with Real Player on it, but I do not have Real Player on my Tungsten. In fact, the software on here is rather barren because I haven't bothered to put anything on. So let's turn it on, just push the button at the top. There's no lock screen like on a modern phone, you just go straight to the home menu, so I guess they weren't too worried about pocket dialing. Let's check out some of the apps here, but first let me re-angle the camera. Alright, so I've fiddled with the camera a little bit, and you should now have a pretty good view of the Tungsten's display. So, there's some boring things like Quick Tour Calendar. The main thing I'd want to show you on this device, which is a bit unique, is the Graffiti System I talked about earlier. So you can see in the memo app, I've typed Dodoid, but, I'm gonna enter some more text. So, I'm just gonna hold the device, and to do a space, you swipe like this. You can use Metaspace, and then you basically write the letters. Like I said, if you want to do an I, you do that. If you don't do the dot, it makes a lowercase l. Backspace is that. And the letters are mainly the normal shapes, like that's a D. It does, however, require that you do things in a certain order. So, for example, this is an X, or an S. This is an X. That's an X. And that is not an X, that's a enter and an L. So it requires that, when it works at least, you do the lines of the X in the right order. Of course, for some letters this doesn't matter, but you do sort of have to learn what order to do things in, and what sort of some of the movements you have to make are to do this. Now the other thing they've done here is, seemingly because there's letters and numbers that are hard to tell apart, they've made a separate area where you write the numbers. So if you want to do, for example, a 7, you have to start from the top. We'll do a enter, there we go. You start from the top and you do 5, 7, there we go. And if you want to do a capital letter, you do it in the middle. So we do like H, and it's hard to use. I don't know how anyone ever used this back in the day. Of course, if you don't want to do that, you can just write directly on the screen. So if we bring up Notepad, you can just write. So, draw, like that, and you have different line thicknesses. You can erase, if you can select it. That's pretty much all. So basically, you have the choice between awful handwriting recognition that requires you to learn a completely different handwriting system, or giant text that's going to be really, really hard to draw and take a long time to write in. Lesser of two evils, I suppose. Now, we do have some basic Pda functions, so we'll use the buttons along the bottom. Let's press tasks, for example. You can see they have a task in there. Don't forget to register. Let's add a task, and here we see another problem with the handwriting recognition. Being a PDA, you kind of need to type for everything. So let's try to type something out. Let's say, use Palm. So, okay, we'll start with a U. It's a V, no. Actually, let's go in the middle for uppercase. U, S, E, space, P. Now, A, and, doesn't like that one. And, Po, and turns out it's picky and you have to start from the top. So we'll do A, L, must not make a dot because that would turn the L I just typed into an I, and we'll do an M. Surely it can't mess up an M. There we go. Use Palm. Now, did you see how long it took me to write that? I know you would get used to it, but could you imagine trying to use this to actually organize your day? It would just make you less productive. Thankfully, they did eventually start putting keyboards on things, but by then it was a little late for them. Now you'll see the other slight problem with the device. Apart from calendar and contacts, I've pretty much showed you everything interesting that it does. The software that it comes with is very barren. Now, you can install things over the USB port, but that requires ancient software and probably finding some Palm apps to run on it as well. So I haven't bothered with that, and unfortunately that means that my Tungsten E is very, very, very simplistic in what it can do. So, it is an interesting little piece of hardware, and I do rather like the design with the groove down the side and the buttons. It's rather well laid out, and it's actually quite a sleek little thing, especially with the thin metal build. But it's rather useless today, and I can't imagine it would have been much better when it came out. So, that was the Palm Tungsten E. Thanks for watching. Bye.